Hey, how's everybody doing today? It is sunny out, but oh gosh, it's windy out there. The trees are like this. It's terrifying. Ooh, and apparently there's people making noise in my neighborhood. I don't know if you heard that. Anyway, um, the world is good, except that I got zero writing done last week. So this week is a brief comment on do as I say and not as I do. I have not, last week, I had family things happening and real life, and I just could not get myself into writing. I just, every time I sat down, nothing. I did a little bit of character development and then I called it a day. And that is not how to do it. Okay. Definitely not a winning way to move forward. I should have done more writing and I just didn't. So do as I say, not as I do. You don't need to not write. You should be writing. Write every day. That said, I took the weekend to clear my mind. I think that I've gotten myself back on track. This morning was, I don't get a lot of writing done on Mondays because I have a lot of other things to do, but I have chopped through everything, and that's a good indication that my writing tomorrow should be fairly flowing because I won't have a whole list of things that need to be done. So there's that. And then I wanted to talk about writing about hard stuff. And I very specifically didn't put in the title what it is that I'm going to talk about because I didn't want to deal with people who just read the title and then started making nasty comments. So some of you know that the Dr. Seuss books were taken out of print. We've had Pepe Le Pew removed for consent violations and a variety of other things. And the left wing is cheering happily, which I still don't get because it's like kind of anti the way the left thinks. But regardless, the right is freaking out. And I'm in the middle here going, I'm an author and a reader. And I don't believe that any book should ever be taken out of print. If somebody wants to purchase a book in this day and age, then print the damn thing and send it to them. If you are that concerned about the content of the book, then take the time to write an historical explanation at the front of the book or at the back of the book or in a footnote and explain why it was done that way at the time it was done. So I'm going to talk a little bit about slavery because I think I don't think anybody who follows me can say, oh, slavery was great. We should bring that back. I think that's one we're all agreed on was bad. So my kids have learned about slavery because we've talked about it in the house and we've discussed it and we've read Huckleberry Finn and we've talked about one of them has read Uncle Tom's Cabin, and we've done these things. And these books are in many places right now in the US are banned. Okay. I find that horrifying because these were teaching moments between me and my children. And I know from having their friends over that there is this belief that slave owners in America were these horrible people who beat their slaves daily and hurt them and caused them extreme anguish and ripped families apart and worked them to death and all this. And yes, there is a swath of American slave owners who did that. But there are at least as many who treated their slaves with kindness. And that's not taught. And you want to know why I have a problem with that? I have a problem with that because those children, if they ever run into slavery that is kind, might think it was okay. And it's not. In a lot of ways, that kindness is even worse because it means the person considered themselves to have some kind of moral imperative that they were somehow better than these other people, and therefore they had to take care of them. They were too stupid or too domesticated or whatever. It's a horrible thing to remove those. If people stop reading them because there is better stuff out there, that's fine. We have print on demand today. There is no reason for any book to be taken out of print. Just don't print it unless somebody wants it. Okay? I'm really big on this because in my books, I sometimes deal with hard subjects. Okay? I talk about, in one of my books, I talk about slavery and I talk about Black people in Scotland and how they were treated, and how Asians were treated in America, and how the Irish were treated when they first came across it, and the Scottish. And to remove books that show those things in a positive light means that we're whitewashing our history. Not that we're making our history look really good, but that we're making it look really bad. And that is equally damaging to future generations. Because, again, if they run into more positive views of slavery or indentured servitude or any of the number of other things which, I'm sorry, are just frankly wrong, they won't understand because it won't match their understanding. And they could assume that it's okay because it's not like that slavery. And I don't want anyone to ever think that. When we remove things from our lexicon, not simply because people aren't reading them, but because we want to clean things up, it is always, 100%, always a bad idea. I don't say 100% things very often, but I stand by this. Okay? We need to show the media that existed during the Reformation, during the Civil War, during the various conflicts that we've had. We need to show our children how people saw it, positive and negative. They have to see the whole story because otherwise they can't understand how we got to where we are. Do you know how difficult it is for me to explain to neighbors' kids why it's not okay to bring somebody over from another country and just treat them really well as your payment for their services? That's slavery. Well, no, because slavery includes beating. And no, it's still slavery and it's still wrong. I have had this actual conversation with local children, and I shouldn't. Okay? There is no such thing as good slavery. There is no such thing as good indentured servitude. And yes, I'm talking to you, IRS. There is no such thing as a positive way to negatively describe somebody. To think that they saw it on Mulberry Street was one of my favorite Dr. Seuss books. Still is my favorite, probably. I loved that book. I read it over and over and over and over again. At no point did I believe that Asian people looked or acted like they did in that book. I assumed that the people in that book were just like all of the other crazy little people with 3 legs or 5 heads or 15 tails, that they were fictional people who were metaphors for a larger statement. I had Asian people who lived on my street. I hung out with Polynesian people. My next door neighbor was from Africa, born in Africa. We had people up the street who were from Ireland. I had Justin Hingarani across the street from me was from Pakistan. And I learned to interact with all of these children. And at no point did I feel that pictures in a book, which were fantasy, were about those people. And if I had dared to say something like that, my parents and my neighbor's parent, my friend's parents would have straightened me the hell out. If I see my children doing that, I straighten them out. Okay? Not allowed. You don't get to label people with nasty labels. You want to label somebody, label them beautiful, label them kind, label them helpful. But if you want to say nasty things about them, don't do it in my hearing, because I will take you down and I will use those same labels on you. The reason that I encourage people to write about these things is because if you don't write about them, if we don't talk about them, they can get swept under the rug. And if that happens, they get forgotten. And history lessons that are forgotten are oft repeated. And I have no interest in repeating them. And unfortunately, I see a little bit of that happening now. Because we have whitewashed our past, because we have made people into demons and angels when they were neither. So, in my sci-fi novel, I have a multitude of races and beliefs, orientations and genders in my crew. And at no point in the book is it likely that you will get more than a cursory explanation of what they look like, and then only because it was necessary to the storyline. It will be up to you to figure out whether this character is Black or that character is Asian. You know why? Because it doesn't matter. Nor should it. I look in my writing, when I'm writing, I look to the bridge of the Enterprise. Okay? At no point did anyone ever say, Uhura is Black. I heard that Uhura was the communications officer. I heard that she wears a red shirt, so she might be an engineering. I heard that, that Sulu was very good with a sword, and that Chekhov was an amazing astrogator. But I never heard until I was an adult that these people were Black, Asian, Russian. And that's how it should be. Roddenberry had the right of it. It's not worth mentioning. Okay? And for those people who are seeing representations of themselves, it means everything that nothing's being said. Nichelle Nichols, who plays Uhura, talks about how she wanted to leave the show at one point, and a number of people stood up for her and spoke for her and with her and held her hand. But it was in the end, it was a young girl who came and told her how excited she was to see a Black lady on the bridge of this starship. And Nichelle realized that even though she didn't feel like her job was all that big a deal, and that she was like the token person, that was only reflecting today's reality. The reality depicted on the show was so far in advance that it did not matter. And that's what the kids picked up. So maybe that's what we need to do. And that's what I'm doing. Because it's really important to me that we not hide our past. We should highlight the good and the bad. And we should study it and look at it and learn from it. And sometimes the good and the bad are really intermixed, and it's really subtle. But you still ought to go and learn about it. And if it hurts when you read it, all the more reason to go and read it. I'm going to leave it there for the day. Sorry I was a bit preachy, but this is a big one for me. I realize that those books aren't censored in that the government has not told people that they may not be produced or sold or owned. But it is still a type of banning, even though it's not being done by the government. And I still think it's wrong. Very, very wrong. And I stand by that. So please go out today and read a banned book. Go out and talk to an author and tell them how awesome some part of their book was that looked like it was difficult to read or write. Trust me, those of us who write those things, we really appreciate it. So have yourselves a good week, guys. Go out and write the hard stuff and do it well, and don't shy away from it. If it's part of your story, then you tell it, and don't let anybody tell you any different. I'll see you next week.